So today is May 5th, 2016, and this is the day I've chosen to repair the bottom of my 23-year-old Wenonah Sundowner canoe, which has served me well, but it took a lot of abuse. In the fall of 2015, coming down the Pigeon River and hitting a lot of rock beds, we scratched the crap out of the bottom. So I'm going to sand this down, apply a coat of epoxy, and hopefully it will look like a new boat when I'm done. I wanted to focus on a couple of things. The first thing that I've researched that I need to do is go around the boat and peel up places where previous repairs have been done. There are areas that look like alligator scale or fish scale. The utility knife here shows one such area. I'm going to take a few minutes and scrape and peel as much of those little peeling, flaking, scaly areas off as I can before I begin the sanding process. So, more later. So I've been working at this for about 30 minutes, and I've discovered that using a straight edge razor seems to work best for getting off this old alligator scale from old repairs. I didn't say that when this canoe, which is now 23 years old, a Wenonah Sundowner, when it was about 5 years old, I put on skid plates on the front and the back to prevent abusing the front and the back, and some of the resin I had left over from that application of the skid plates I used at the time to repair some of the deeper scrapes, and that has oxidized, and you can you see this here? It comes up pretty easily. So I'm using the straight edge razor basically to scrape that off, and while I'm at it, I'm basically just gently using that same straight edge razor to just scrape all of the bottom of the boat to try to get off any residue. Here's another place I repaired probably 15 or 18 years ago, and I'm just getting that to come off so the new epoxy will adhere. Here's another spot over here. So it comes up pretty easily. Supposedly the exposure to UV light breaks this resin down over time. And then there's one other spot right in here. You can see where some of the fabric of the Kevlar, this scratch is deep enough that you can see some of the fiber of the Kevlar coming through. But that will be sanded, and I'm not going to scrape that real aggressively because I don't want to tear up that fabric. But that will all be covered. So more updates in a minute. Two other tips for doing this project. One, you need to have a dog to supervise your every move. This is Stella, and she's helping out quite a lot. Second tip is I found the hard way that if you're working on this and have it on sawhorses and you lean against the canoe, you lose track of what you're doing and the canoe falls off the side or the edge of the sawhorse. So I put in just clamps at the edge of the sawhorse for stops. That way the canoe doesn't slide off the end when I'm pushing against the side, sanding or scraping the boat. I've done all the scraping now. Now it's time to do the sanding. So sanding is next with 150 grit sandpaper. So this is a progress report or update. I have about half the canoe sanded now. I'm sanding the bottom and about halfway up the side. You can see here where, at least I hope you can see where the top part of the canoe down here is unsanded, still a little shiny, and you get this coating of dust that adheres to the canoe where it has been sanded. A lot of dust created, so I am wearing a dust mask when the sanding's going on and ear protection. But this end of the canoe over here has not yet been sanded. It's still fairly shiny, but you can see the scratches still. So that's the update. Halfway through the sanding, that end is sanded. This end has not yet been sanded. Going pretty quickly, again using 150 grit sandpaper. I'll sand the other half now and give you another update soon. Okay, sanding is now completely done. You can see where the dust is still adherent to the hull about halfway up to the gunnel where I've sanded it. Didn't sand the top part, but it's totally done. The next step then is to clean all the dust off and clean it completely with acetone, which I'm about to do. And then the fun of the epoxy comes. But first, cleaning with acetone. The next step that I'm going to do here is to take this acetone and a clean cotton rag and just wipe off all of the surfaces I've just sanded, make sure everything is really clean with the acetone. Acetone is nasty stuff, very flammable. You don't want to breathe the fumes, etc. So I don't like using it, but there's not a lot of choice here, and I'm outdoors in a well-ventilated area, and I'll try to hold my breath. So anyway, I'm also going to wear protection over my hands to keep the acetone off my skin. So anyway, next step, acetone wash wipe. Now that the boat is all scraped, sanded, cleaned with acetone, it's time to do the epoxy. This is the epoxy I selected, the West System resin and hardener. West System resin is a bit pricey, but I think for this whole kit, the pump system, the hardener, the resin, I paid around $90 from an online place. I bought the roller, which I'll put the resin on with at a local home goods store like Lowe's or Menards, I think is where I got it. Ready to go. Actually, I'm waiting for the sun to go down a little bit more so the whole canoe is in the shade, which will be about another hour. Starting the process of mixing, I did buy these pumps, the pump system that the West epoxy people sell, and they're supposed to pre-measure out the exact amount. The first thing I have to do though is prime these pumps, and they tell me that I push down until I feel resistance. Okay, so this pump is primed. Do the same for the hardener, getting all the air out basically. And once, all right, we're good. So now you do one complete compression of this all the way down. You mix 1 to 1 or one pump downward. So there's one complete pump of the hardener, one complete pump of the resin, and I'm going to do, I think, 4. So there's 2 resins, 3 resins, so 4 pumps of each. Now I'm going to mix this for a minute, make sure it's completely mixed. Okay, we're about 15 more seconds of mixing and this will be mixed. I really have no idea about coverage, so I wasn't sure how much to mix up. I suspect this won't cover too much of the boat, but it'll be a good start. Maybe 10 more seconds. Have a roller, the stuff mixed up, and hope this works. Just gonna pour a bead of it out. Try to get it all out because this stuff's expensive. And it does have a like a syrup consistency. It's really sticky, like corn syrup maybe. And I can tell already that I could have mixed up a lot more. Okay, started mixing the second batch, and much to my dismay, the pump has fallen apart. The top became unscrewed. I can't get it back together, so I'm very unimpressed with the pump system, and now I'm into it. And the pump and the resin basically came unscrewed. I can't screw it back together, so I'm not sure I have the right ratio mixed in this batch. And because I'm in the middle of things, not sure how it'll turn out. So I would definitely recommend not using these pumps and just measuring it out. Even though that might be less convenient, you won't run into this problem with the pump breaking in the middle of applying the resin. So not very happy at the moment. So this stuff is starting to get thick and harden up, which is good because the pump broke. I don't know that I got the right ratio mixed exactly, but now that it is getting kind of thick, I'm going around with a sponge brush and smoothing out drips like along the sides, but I'm also, I don't know if you can zoom in on this, but in places where there are more damage and the fabric is showing through, I'm able to put a little extra resin right on that spot, and then because it is kind of thick, I can work it over that place that's a little more damaged and work it so that all of the fabric that's exposed will be covered in that spot. A few of the deeper grooves or scratches, I poured a little extra of this thickening epoxy there and tried to fill those in a little bit where they hadn't self-leveled themselves. So hopefully this will harden in spite of the malfunction of the pump, and I guess we'll know in a few hours if this worked. Otherwise, it's sand it all off, order some more resin, and not use pumps ever again that they sell for a high price, but simply measure it out by volume, which, lesson learned, that's definitely what I would do next time in 23 more years when I do this to this canoe again. Okay. So it's another day, and the first coat of the epoxy actually turned out quite well, despite the problems I had with the West system pump failing early in the mixing process. Apparently I guessed well enough and got the ratio of the resin to the hardener about right, and the first coat has cured. This is about a day and a half later, and things look good, but there are still a few spots that I want to try to cover a little more. Here's an example of one here where the fabric still is, it's covered with the epoxy, but it's still sticking up and not smooth with the surrounding surface. So I've decided to do one more coat of epoxy. I have enough of the hardener and resin left that I can do that. So in between coats, what I have done is used a 180 grit sanding block and lightly gone over just the bottom. I didn't extend down onto the sides, but just the bottom is where I'll put the second coat. Sanded it lightly with the 180 grit sandpaper, and then I cleaned it again with acetone and a rag. I've done that already, and because of my bad experience with the West system pumps, I found this on an online site, and I'm going to measure the hardener resin at the proper ratio using cheap plastic cups. I bought these cups at a dollar store type place for $1, There's plenty of them you can see through. And so halfway done with this second coat, just wanted to show how I mix this stuff up using this cup system. Nested cups, the outside cup is marked. I added hardener to the first line, and then resin to the second line. I'm done mixing it up now, so I'm about to apply it. Again, this seems to work better. And all mixed. Get some off the stick so as not to waste any. Put the stick aside. And now pour this on. It has kind of the consistency of corn syrup, I would say. I'm going to take that out, let it drain, put my measuring calibrated cup aside. And again, for this coat, I only came down to about here with the fine sanding because I basically wanted to put the second coat just on the bottom mostly, where it will get the most scratches and the most wear. So use the roller. When I do the roller, I get kind of this white, milky sheen, but that seems to go away as it cures and as it sets. So just spreading it around, trying to get the coat even. So getting ready to put a coat of marine varnish on to give this epoxy some UV protection. I've sanded down the little ridge which was created by applying the epoxy down to the place that was taped with painter's tape. Sanded that, and I've very finely sanded the other surface to get good adherence with the marine varnish. I'm going to use this stuff, Epiphane's marine varnish. It has high UV filtering capabilities. The instructions on the can say to thin it with a little bit of mineral spirit, so I'm actually going to thin it 1 part mineral spirits to 2 parts varnish for the first coat. Subsequent coats, and I think I'm going to put on 2 or 3, will just be thinned less or the straight varnish, and I'll sand with very fine, like 320 grit paper in between the coats of varnish. Again, this is maybe overkill, but it will give the epoxy some UV protection. So on with the varnish. So have the varnish thin slightly, and I'm using a sponge brush for this. Put the varnish on, maybe the same way we did the epoxy. Just put some on and spread it around. I'm already realizing that this stuff is so thin and clear, it's really hard to see where I've been. Okay, we are done. The canoe has been refinished. Very pleased with the way this came out. The epoxy on the bottom, followed by some UV protective marine varnish of high quality. Scratches are still visible, but now they're buried under a pretty thick protective coat of epoxy and UV protective. Along the edge there is this small rim where I put painter's tape and newspaper down the side, but overall looks great. Anxious to get it on the water, and that's how you refurbish a 23-year-old Wenonah Sundowner canoe. The end.